In the cold silence of a distant starship, a humble cargo worker stumbles upon a young steward crying alone in the shadows, unaware that this single moment will uncover a decades-old connection, reveal a hidden ruler's true identity, and change the fate of lives across the galaxy. If you are new to the channel, then please subscribe to the channel and like the video and tell us where are you watching from. Now, let's jump into the story. The Aurora's Grace moved through deep space with the steady hum of a vessel that had crossed countless light years. The corridors were quiet in the late hours, the crew either asleep or occupied in their own duties. In Storage Bay 12, the air was cooler, the lighting softer, casting long shadows between tall shelves stacked with supplies. Kyle Driftwell stepped inside, his boots making a soft thud on the metal floor. To anyone watching, he looked like an ordinary cargo technician. His uniform was simple, his tool belt worn from daily use. He had been living among the crew for months, blending in, learning the hidden truths about life aboard his own ship. Had come to retrieve a replacement filter unit, nothing more. But as he rounded the corner, he stopped. A young woman sat on a supply crate near the far wall. Her name, he would learn later, was Leora Fensley. Her posture was slumped, her uniform slightly wrinkled, as if the weight of the day had pressed down on her shoulders. Blonde strands had slipped from her neat braid, framing a face streaked with tears. Her eyes were red, her gaze fixed on the floor. For a moment, Kalen said nothing. He knew grief when he saw it. In his own life, he had faced losses so heavy. They still lingered in his mind. Quietly, he stepped forward, careful not to startle her. "Are you all right?" he asked, his voice low, carrying a steady calm that seemed to belong to someone far older than his appearance suggested. Liora blinked, quickly pulling a tissue from her pocket to wipe her face. "Just tired," she said, her tone quick and sharp, then softened with a sigh. "If you had lost your mother and still had to smile for passengers every day, you might understand." The words struck him harder than he expected. He had faced many truths in his life, but hearing them from her felt different. It was not only the loss she spoke of, but the way she carried it, still working, still standing. "I am sorry," he replied. There was a weight in his tone, a sincerity that came naturally to him when he forgot to guard his words. Sometimes the universe asks too much from us. Leora glanced up, her expression wary, as if uncertain whether to speak again. Passengers do not see what happens behind the scenes. They do not know how many hours we work or how much we give up. She paused, then looked away. And none of that changes the fact that some of us still have to keep going no matter what. Kalen lowered himself onto a crate opposite her. The silence between them was not awkward, but steady, like the stillness of space itself. He studied her quietly, seeing the exhaustion in her posture, the resilience in the way she sat upright, even when worn down. He thought of his own mother. She had been a technician on a lesser vessel decades ago, working in the harsh radiation of engine bays for long hours. She never complained, but the strain had taken its toll. He had carried the memory of her until now, and in Leora's face, he saw the same determination mixed with unspoken pain. "Do you want to be alone?" he asked. "It hardly matters," Leora replied. She glanced at a small wrist display. "I have 4 minutes before I need to return to my station." Kalen stayed where he was. "Loss is not something you simply get over," he said. "Only those who have felt it can understand." Her head tilted slightly, surprise flickering in her eyes. "Exactly," she said. "People think you should just move on, as if it were that easy." Kalen felt a pull inside him, a quiet reminder that this was why he had come aboard in disguise. There were truths he could never learn from official reports or smiling captains during inspections. Only in quiet corners like this, in storage, bays and crew lounges during off hours. Could he see the real state of his people? The intercom chimed softly in the distance, a reminder of the constant rhythm of life aboard the Aurora's Grace. Leora stood, adjusting her uniform, pulling her braid tighter. "I have to go," she said, her voice steady, but her eyes still shadowed. Ka-El-In watched her walk away, her steps measured and quiet. He did not know yet why her grief stayed with him, as much as it did, but he sensed a connection, a thread between their lives that he could not yet name. He turned back to the shelves, retrieving the filter unit he had come for. Yet his thoughts were no longer on his maintenance duties. They were on the steward with the quiet voice and the burden she carried without complaint. As he left the storage bay, Kalen made a silent decision. He would watch over her, not because it was his role as a ruler, but because something about her told him that she mattered, not just to herself or her family, but to the soul of the Aurora's Grace itself. And though she could not know it yet, Leora Fensley had just caught the attention of someone who could change the course of her life. Someone who, in time, would show her that even in the vast cold of space, there were forces far warmer than any sun. The days aboard the Aurora's Grace followed their usual rhythm, but Kalen Driftwell's attention was no longer on the routine maintenance tasks he performed. His thoughts returned often to the quiet meeting in Storage Bay 12 and the young steward named Leora Fensley. He began to notice her more, not through direct conversation, but by quietly observing the way she moved through her work. Each night shift, while other crew members preferred rest, Leora took her place at the hospitality console on passenger deck 3. She greeted travelers from distant systems with calm professionalism, even when exhaustion showed faintly in her eyes. Kalen noticed she often arrived well before her shift began, using the extra time to check supplies, organize the service stations, and ensure everything was ready for the next wave of passengers. He saw her kindness in small but powerful moments. When an elderly traveler from the Ventari system discovered he could not afford the premium oxygen blend his species needed for comfort, Leora quietly adjusted the system, using her own crew credits. She did not tell anyone what she had done. She simply smiled and told the passenger that the ship had found a solution. On another night, a young mother from the Centura colonies spilled a nutrient drink across the deck. Rather than calling for cleaning staff, Leora knelt to help, working quickly while speaking gently to the embarrassed woman. Kalen stood in the background, pretending to check a wall panel, but he saw the gratitude in the mother's eyes. It became clear to him that Leora carried out acts of service even when no one was watching. She volunteered for the least desired shifts, stayed after her hours to complete unfinished tasks, and gave quiet support to passengers and crew alike. Kalen began to understand that her kindness was not a choice she made only when it was convenient. It was something she lived by. One night, he found her again in the quiet of a storage area, this time not in tears, but sitting with a small holographic photo. She looked at it for a long time before noticing Kalen had entered. "Is that your family?" he asked softly. "My brother," she replied, holding the image so he could see. A boy of about 7 smiled in the picture, his bright eyes full of energy. "His name is Oren. I am all he has now." Kalen sat across from her, his expression steady. "Does he know about your mother?" he asked. "No," Leora said. "He thinks she is still receiving treatment on one of the medical stations. Every day he asks when she will come home. I tell him soon, even though I know she never will." Her voice caught, and she pressed her lips together, determined not to cry. "He sends her drawings," she continued, "and I pretend to send them to her. I want to protect him from this for as long as I can." Kalen felt the same heaviness in his chest that he had experienced the first time they met. It was rare for him to be moved so deeply, but Leora's quiet strength affected him in ways he could not yet explain. In the days that followed, Kaelin made a choice. He would do what he could to make her life, and Oren's, a little easier. But he would do it quietly, without revealing who he truly was. Using a private communication channel few aboard the ship knew existed, he arranged for deliveries to be made to Leora's quarters. The packages contained nutritious food, educational modules for her brother, and small comforts such as warm blankets for the colder cycles. Each delivery came with a simple message, "From a friend of your mother." He also sent small touches he knew would matter: a toy starship kit for Oren, a datapad with interactive learning games, and even a few bright flowers grown in the hydroponics bay. He wanted these gestures to feel like care, not charity. Kaelin was careful to watch from a distance. He saw Leora's expression soften when she returned to her quarters after a long shift and found the items waiting, though she never knew where they came from. The weight she carried seemed slightly lighter each day. Yet Kaelin's most personal gesture was still to come. Through secure archives, he found something he had kept for years, a child's drawing on digital paper. It showed a large-scaled figure with wide wings and a gentle smile, standing beside a small girl and her mother. The colors were uneven, the lines uncertain, but the sentiment was clear. The drawing had been given to him 2 decades earlier by a little girl he had met after rescuing her mother during a shuttle accident. He had kept it as a reminder of a moment when he had been seen not as a ruler or a warrior, but as a protector. Now he had no doubt the girl from that day was Leora. He had the drawing framed and delivered anonymously to her locker. Later, he saw her pause as she found it, her hand covering her mouth. "Who would keep this for so long?" she whispered, her voice full of wonder. Kaelin turned away before she could notice him nearby. He had no intention of revealing his connection. Not yet. But he knew the time was coming when he would need to tell her everything. Got for now, he would continue to watch and quietly support her. Every act of kindness she gave to others only deepened his belief that she was someone who could change the heart of a ship, and perhaps even the course of his own life. He returned to his quarters that night with the image of her holding the framed drawing still fresh in his mind. In the vast silence of space, Kaelin Driftwell began to feel something he had not felt in a long time, the sense that he was exactly where he was meant to be. Weeks passed aboard the Aurora's Grace, and Kaelin Driftwell's quiet mission continued. Each day he worked alongside the crew as a humble cargo technician. Each night he kept watch over Leora Fensley from a distance. The anonymous gifts kept arriving in her quarters. Food for the long shifts, educational modules for her brother Oren. Small comforts that made the cold stretches of space feel less empty. But the moment that would change everything began with a single decision. Kaelin knew he could not remain hidden forever. There would come a time when the truth about who he was and why he had come aboard would have to be revealed. The opportunity arrived when a ship-wide assembly was called to address concerns from crew members. The gathering took place in the main hall, a vast chamber lit by the soft glow of suspended star lamps. Crew of every species filled the space, voices murmuring as they waited for the ship's senior officers to speak. Liora stood near the back, her uniform crisp, her expression curious. She had no idea what was about to happen. When the room settled, the doors at the far end opened. Kaelin entered, but he was no longer in his technician's coveralls. The disguise was gone. Before the astonished eyes of the crew, he revealed his true form. Standing over 9 feet tall, his body was covered in copper gold scales that shimmered in the light. His eyes glowed with a steady brilliance, and a crown-like ridge of horns framed his powerful head. He was not a cargo worker. He was the sovereign ruler of the Valdirian Alliance, commander of the most respected fleet in the known sectors. A stunned silence filled the hall. You know me as Kalen from maintenance. His deep voice carried through the chamber, resonating with authority. But my full name is Kalen Volterin. I founded the fleet that carries this ship among the stars. Whispers rippled through the gathered crew. Liara's eyes widened, her hand gripping the edge of the seat in front of her. I came aboard in disguise, Kalen continued, to see with my own eyes if this vessel still holds the spirit I intended when I created the fleet. And I found it in a hospitality steward named Liara Fensley. Every head turned toward her. She froze, her cheeks warming under the sudden attention. Ka-ele, and stepped forward slowly, his massive form somehow radiating calm rather than intimidation. 20 years ago, during a shuttle accident near the Rim colonies, I rescued a woman and her young daughter. That girl drew me a picture, calling me her guardian. I kept it all these years. A quiet gasp escaped Liara's lips. That girl, Kalen said, his gaze fixed on her, was you. The memory struck her all at once. The day she had clung to her mother's hand. The scaled figure who had shielded them from falling debris. The kind eyes that had knelt to speak to her at her level. She had thought of him as a figure from a half-remembered dream, never believing she would see him again. You reminded me. Why I began this journey, Kalen said, his voice steady and filled with something deeper than command. Strength is not only in ships and weapons. Sometimes it is in showing up every day, in carrying burdens without complaint, in choosing kindness even when the universe offers none in return. He turned to address the entire crew. From this day forward, changes will be made. Paid bereavement. Leave will be granted to all crew members. Psychological support services will be available on every ship. Child care facilities will be established for those with families. Schedules will be adjusted to ensure no one is overworked to exhaustion. The hall erupted in applause, the sound echoing against the high walls. But Kalen's eyes never left. When the applause faded, he stepped closer to her. Liara, he said, his voice softer now, you have carried more than most, and still you choose to make the lives around you brighter. You reminded me who I wanted to be when I began. All of this. She met his gaze, still trying to understand how the humble technician she had spoken to, in quiet corners, was the same being who now stood before her in regal form. You were the guardian from the accident, she said quietly. Kale and nodded once. And I will be a guardian still, if you will allow it. The moment lingered between them, the weight of the past and the promise of something new merging in the stillness of the hall. The crew began to disperse, but word of the Emperor's revelation spread quickly through the decks. Whispers of the undercover mission, of the steward who had caught the ruler's attention, and of the sweeping reforms filled every corridor. As Liara returned to her duties later that cycle, she found herself touching the framed drawing that now sat on her small shelf. The lines and colors were simple, the work of a child's hand, yet it had been carried across decades and light years to return to her now. For Kalen Volterin, the disguise had been set aside. The mission that had begun as an inspection of his fleet had become something far more personal. And though the galaxy knew him as a ruler of unmatched power, in this moment he was simply a guardian who had found the person who once saved his heart from growing cold, and he knew he would never let that connection fade again. Life aboard the Aurora's Grace slowly shifted after the day Kalen Volterin revealed himself. New policies came into effect. Crew members began to speak openly about the changes. There was more rest, more support, and a growing sense that their leader truly understood their struggles. But for Kalen, the greatest change was not in the ship's schedules or facilities. It was in the quiet bond forming between himself, Liara Fensley, and her young brother Orendot. In the weeks that followed, Kalen made himself a constant presence in their lives. When Liara worked the day cycle, he personally escorted Orin to the ship's education center. On free afternoons, he took the boy to the observation deck to watch the soft glow of nebulae drift past. He taught him the names of distant stars and told stories from worlds few humans had seen. Laura watched these moments with a growing warmth in her heart. She had spent years believing she had to face the universe alone. Now, she felt the quiet strength of someone willing to stand beside her. No matter the distance they traveled. One cycle, the three of them visited the memorial garden on the upper deck. The garden was a tranquil place, filled with living plants, brought from dozens of worlds. Between them stood memorial stones etched with holographic images of those who had passed. Orin carried a small drawing. He had made a picture of his mother smiling, with himself and Liara standing beside her. He placed it carefully at the base of her stone. "Do you think she knows about you?" Orin asked, looking up at Kaelin. "I am certain she does," Kaelin replied. His voice was steady, but his eyes carried a depth of feeling that words could not fully hold. He knelt and rested a scaled hand gently on the boy's shoulder. "And I promise to care for both of you, always." As they stood together, a voice called from across the garden. It was the ship's operations officer, looking uneasy. "Emperor Volterin, the Altari delegation has arrived early. They are requesting your presence in the diplomatic suite." Kaelin did not take his eyes off Orin's drawing. "Tell them the Emperor is engaged in matters of greater importance." The officer hesitated. "But sir, the treaty negotiations can wait," Kaelin said firmly. "Family cannot." The officer nodded and left, and Liara turned to Kaelin with quiet surprise. "That treaty has been in preparation for 3 years. Then it can wait 3 more hours, he replied with the hint of a smile. "The universe teaches us patience, but not at the cost of moments like these." Later that evening, they sat together in the observation lounge. Stars stretched endlessly beyond the viewport, their light cold and distant, yet strangely comforting. Orin had fallen asleep on a nearby couch, curled beneath a warm blanket. Laura's voice was soft when she spoke. "When my mother died, I thought the universe had abandoned us. I thought we were just tiny particles drifting in the dark." Kaelin considered her words. "My species lives for centuries," he said. "I have seen worlds born and worlds vanish. But nothing has taught me more about the value of existence than watching you care for your brother." She studied his face. The way the dim light played across his scales, the way his breathing shifted their color slightly. "Why did you keep that drawing all these years?" she asked. "Because it was the first time someone saw me not as a ruler or a warrior, but as a protector," he said. "My people have always valued strength above all else. You showed me another kind of strength." An alert chimed softly on Kellen's wrist communicator. Without looking, he silenced it. "Aren't you going to check that?" Liara asked. "Have spent centuries being important," Kaelin said. "I am learning the value of simply being present." Orin stirred in his sleep, and both of them moved at once to adjust his blanket. Their hands brushed briefly, neither pulling away immediately. "You are not how the galaxy imagines its emperor," Liara said with a faint smile. "Public image requires a certain performance," Kaelin replied. "The galaxy believes Valdirians are incapable of compassion. Perhaps we have believed it ourselves for too long." The ship's lighting dimmed, marking the transition to the night cycle. The stars beyond seemed to multiply, as if the darkness revealed more of the universe's secrets. "My brother asked me yesterday if you were going to leave soon," Liara said. "He has grown attached to you." "And what did you tell him?" Kaelin asked. "I said I didn't know," she admitted. "Emperors have responsibilities beyond what we can imagine." Kaelin looked at her directly. "I have dozens of advisors and governors. For years I believed my presence was irreplaceable in the capital. Now I understand that being truly irreplaceable has nothing to do with power. What will happen when the Aurora's Grace finishes this voyage? She asked, the question she had been holding back. Tradition says I should return to the capital, he said. But traditions can evolve. Perhaps the flagship will find reason to remain in this sector. Liara hesitated before speaking again. I have been offered a position as head of passenger relations. It comes with a private suite for Orin and me. I have not given my answer yet. And what would make your decision easier? Kaelin asked. Whether we are saying goodbye or beginning something we cannot yet name. She replied, K-E-L-E-N single quotes. His eyes softened. Among my people, a promise is kept for a lifetime. So I will give you this one. I will stay. 3 days later, the Auroras? Grace announced an extended voyage through the outer sectors, a decision that sparked speculation across the Alliance. No one knew the true reason, except for a few who had seen the Emperor building a small model starship with a boy in the recreation area, while a woman in a steward's uniform watched, her smile brighter than the stars outside, sometimes the universe. Places us exactly where we need to be at exactly the right time to find exactly the right people. A single act of kindness can change the course of many lives. For Kaelin Valterin, the greatest journey had not been through the stars, but toward the two lives who had become his home.